It is my honor to speak to you today on behalf of my brothers and sisters who usually say that Anita likes the sound of her own voice. They're not completely wrong, but saying goodbye to Mom is not a speech that I want to give. I'm just going to chat a bit about perfect moms and perfect families. As a girl, Ruby was very smart. She graduated high school at 16 and she earned her associate's degree at 18. Her brother, Henry, was in the Army at the time, and his best friend was named Clifford Seay. Well, one day, Clifford saw a photo of Henry's sister, Ruby. And Ruby took his breath away. Well, once he pulled himself together, he said to Henry, do you mind if I write letters to your sister Ruby? I promise you my intentions are honorable. That's how men spoke back in the day. Or at least this is my version of the story. So I don't know how many letters were exchanged, but I do know that feelings grew. And one day, a shiny car with wide white wall tires rolled up in front of Grandma's house in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And out stepped a tall drink of hot chocolate, dressed in an Army uniform, looking sharp. Ruby came outside and she looked at him and he looked at her, and everyone heard wedding bells. Now, as smart as Ruby was, she apparently forgot her lessons about biology because the babies came quickly. Clifford, Rita, Sonia, Andre. It was supposed to end there, and it did for quite a while, but almost 10 years later, Anita came. And thank God I did, because my brothers and sisters needed someone to keep an eye on them. They needed someone to eavesdrop on their phone conversations, tell their secrets, boss them around, and basically keep them all in line. That's what the youngest does. So my siblings, because we're of the age difference, my siblings were raised by an active duty soldier and a stay-at-home mom. But by the time I was born, they'd settled in what used to be called New Shrewsbury. And my father was retired from the service, and my mother had just started her professional career. Mom didn't change that much, though. She always had this thing about grammar. When I thought I was cool, I would come home and say things that the other kids at school said. One day, my mom said to me, would you please go get the newspaper? And I responded, where it at? Because that's how the cool kids talked. Ruby lost it. Maybe it's behind that preposition at. That was my mommy. And this is how I became bilingual. Because I spoke the Queen's English at home and the cool kids' English outside. And because of the rest of my family had lived abroad before I was born, I had to learn German if I wanted to use the family stereo. And I still spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. It never occurred to me that I couldn't study multiple languages at one time, and I did. Enough about me. Every generation has its perfect TV moms. There was June Cleaver, then there was Carol Brady, there was Claire Huxtable, and of course there was Aunt Viv. They had the perfect response to every situation, just like Ruby. Mom built our confidence by making us feel like we knew more than she did. She made sure that we knew that we came from the bloodline of crafters, innovators, and scholars. And she gave us the tools we needed at home to be our personal best. Guitars, batons, clarinets, organs. Ooh, was there a drum set? I know there were sewing machines, ice skates, roller skates, football gear, and there was at least one boat that belonged to Andre. If we were interested in something, we got it. And no one could tell us that we were not going to be superstars. Except we were not. Well, as goes with kids, we would quickly lose interest, and she would just say, "Oh, that's okay, Pumpkin. The important thing is you tried your best." No, she didn't. That was Carol Brady on the Brady Bunch. Ruby would actually say, "Do you think I'm shaking a money tree? I don't care if you like it or not. I paid for that horn with good money, and you go back in that room and blow it until it sounds like something." You know it's true. Mom was gorgeous, and she got a lot of attention. And she had a couple of standard, humble responses when someone would pay her a compliment in public. "You're so kind. Aren't you sweet?" But when she got together with her sisters, inevitably someone in public would tell all of them how beautiful they were. And even First Lady Frankie May would forget to be humble. And we kids knew that we were going to hear that story over and over and over again. And the more they told it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. But you know what else happened? The Allen sisters grew more confident. There's nothing wrong with a little confidence. And they also felt closer as sisters. And so did we as cousins. You see, when we get too literal with the Bible, like when we read about being humble, the importance of being humble, which is very good, sometimes we get a little too literal. with it, and we can obliterate our sense of self. And we lose out on opportunities to bond over our shared goodness. Ruby knew when to be humble, but she also knew when to brag, especially when it came to her children. Now, over the years, each one of us gave her many, many reasons to hold her head down in shame, to cry herself to sleep at night, to feel like she couldn't go on. But she did. And eventually, we all grew up. Some of us a little too fast, and some of us too slow. But it didn't matter, because she knew that we were each born with our own unique pace and timeline. And rude remarks about what we were doing or not doing bounced right off of her superhero chest. It hurt, but she made up for it by bragging when we finally got it right. And we did. She made sure that everyone knew that her daughter, Sonia Renee, had become Medina, the fashion designer. And her eldest son, Clifford, travels around the state performing and singing professionally. And her late son, Andre, gave such a mean haircut that men would actually cross the state line to come to see Andre and get a shape-up. And her eldest daughter, Rita, holds multiple degrees and uses every bit of knowledge to help children reach their full potential. And what about Anita? Well, not everyone has been impressed by my life overseas. Comments are sometimes made about me not loving my family enough to stick around, or not being loyal to my country. On one visit home, I overheard Mom on the telephone, and of course I only heard her side of the conversation. And being the youngest child, it was my duty to eavesdrop, so I just listened. I heard Mom say, Anita is doing exactly what God has called her to do. If you have a problem with it, take it up with God. That was the conversation I overheard. It touched my heart that my mom was suffering for me. And I also knew that that was just one of many other conversations that I would never hear. Now, Mom taught us girls to sew. We would measure and lay out the fabric and the pattern and pin it down, but we were never allowed to cut it on the same day. You go to sleep, wake up the next day. because Mom knew that things looked differently in the light of day. But she also knew that just about any mistake could be transformed into something so much more beautiful. And she taught us a lot of life lessons with fabric, scissors, and pins and needles in her hands. If Mom was ever in a bad mood, you could just mention baking a cake. And she would smile. She would tie on an apron and tell you to get out the flour and the sugar and the butter and the milk. And if you made a mistake and confused the sugar with the salt, she would very calmly say, "Every mistake you make, I made first. Now throw this salty cake away and let's make a new one." That's the truth. Claire Huxtable did not say that. My mommy did. To my dear brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, and anyone else who might feel like they are the forgotten ingredient in the cake, please believe me when I tell you, you are not. Come on, let's get personal. It's just us here. I'm a therapist, so I understand, respect, and support 100% the need to set healthy boundaries. If someone is toxic, you can figure out how to love that person from a distance while you figure things out and maybe get some help with it. Whatever happens, just know that you will never stop being a Seay, an Allen, or a Galbach. It's wonderful to see people turn over a new leaf when they accept Christ, but what happens in heaven is something completely different. We cannot even imagine the level of change in a person. It is the culmination of the perfecting process. Mom, Dad, Andre already have new bodies, new hearts. Dad no longer has PTSD from defending our country in World War II and Korea. Andre doesn't even remember what it means to be a womanizer. My apologies if any of his exes are in the room. And Ruby is already in heaven at a party in her honor. Her mind has been erased of the pain and frustration and confusion of life on earth. Her heart has been filled with unconditional, unlimited love for all of us. And right now, her fingers are on the keys of the pearly white piano that she always wanted to learn how to play, but never did. Her voice, that was usually a little off-key, is so angelic that Aretha Franklin is singing backup right now. And where is Dad? He's listening. Dad is sitting on the dock of the bay with Otis Redding by his side. And Andre and Jesus are swaying to the music in unison. Mom doesn't remember who trampled over her flower bed or who borrowed money and didn't pay it back. She doesn't remember the broken window or the empty cookie jar that a house full of children claimed to know nothing about. And praise God, she has forgotten our teenage years. She doesn't know who wasn't where they were supposed to be, who climbed out of what window or into what window. It is all over. It's over. The only thing that's left is the cake. And whether or not you choose to show up, you are all up in the recipe. Brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. We all make mistakes. And even though Ruby liked to pretend to be broke, she always had enough money to buy more ingredients to bake another cake. Ingredients can be replaced. Family cannot. It's time to toss out the mistakes and bake a new cake together in honor of Ruby.